that brings a good segue into the villain of the week. Do-do-do-do. That's the new villain of the week song. So, the villain of the week is named Mr. Felix. Mr. Felix was one of Gustav's teachers.
If people haven't listened to this podcast before, they have no idea what's going on.
Shut it down.
So just as each episode we're choosing a person to celebrate, we're having a small section for a person to denigrate, let's say.
Yeah, and this week the person is fictional. Usually the person has been real. Yeah. Ellen, for example.
Ellen DeGeneres,
we don't.
Satan.
So, Mr. Felix. Oh yeah, Satan was.
He was the villain of the week.
Yeah, I forgot. Okay. Mr. Felix was Gustav's math teacher for a few years in school, and Gustav was really good at math. Some people, have that knack. Mm-hmm. But Mr. Felix was trying to steal him to the dark, non-creative side. But Gustav was a very well-rounded student, obviously, with his history and art upbringing. Home systems and social imagination were his two best subjects. I'll get into that later. But Mr. Felix was trying to say, no, Gustav. Shun the arts. Shun those things. Lean into the science. We need more scientists. And try and convert him. And I had this image of perhaps Gustav's best friend, we'll call him Roman, was also similar to Gustav, but he was won over by Mr. Felix and ended up just studying the uncontextualized maths.
Right. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but you think that's, I guess if you had a kid who had a flair for the humanities, maybe it would be a little bit of a soul-sucking, I guess it's not really a teacher's job anyway.
No, the reason I chose this is because often in school, you have kids aren't like born math or art, but we try and divide them.
Okay, I got it.
And I'm saying in the Solacene, the goal of everyone should be to be both.
So it would have been similarly bad if you had an arts teacher who was saying shun the sciences. I got it.
Yeah. So yeah, it could have been either or. It could have been an art teacher who's like, shun the sciences, don't listen to them, just keep painting.
Her name would be Madame Roux.
Yeah.
Does he learn any other languages, by the way?
I'll get into that.
Okay. Just because I didn't want him to be like this ultra crazy, gifted, unattainable. He's an everyman, as we were saying.
Exactly. That's why now I'll talk about his schooling. So, as I said, his two best classes were home systems and social imagination. As always, those are made up because we make up everything. So, home systems is how to run an efficient home. And this talks about energy efficiency, water efficiency. It talks about all those elements, perhaps even insulation, how to physically build a house.
Yeah.
It's a combo of that plus the traditional home ec skills of cooking and sewing. It's not a one-year course. It's built throughout their whole education, and he was really good at this and really good at finding ways to kind of smush together perhaps the water efficiency with cooking a good meal and those types of things.
I had a similar note, and perhaps this is also inspired by his year in the woods, as we were saying.
Yeah.
Regarding the way that he embodies tactility in the Solacene, I think he has that kind of engineering brain.
Yeah.
And this is also maybe us projecting a bit because, as we were saying, we're basically designing a person who will be all the things that we would like to be, but will never be. I have a terrible brain for such things, but I'm always very impressed by people who have a systems-oriented thinking. So I was also thinking maybe along these lines, in his spare time, he likes to build furniture. He's a bit of a budding carpenter. And in brackets, in my notes, I just said Christ.
Cool.
So
similar to Christ, who was a carpenter.
Indeed.
I think we prefaced this by saying, oh, it'll be an overfilled life. But when you think about it, life is quite long. If you live to be 80, you can do a lot of things. But we tell ourselves you can only do one or two things. You have to be an expert in them both. But you can be good at a lot of things. And you can explore a lot of things. It's definitely a younger person's mentality because a lot of grandparents and older people had one career. They were at a company for 60 years. But with us, and I think even our parents, it's much more common to jump around.
Yeah, and I think even career, because we don't maybe speak to those people or they're lost to time a bit, you say, oh, he spent 60 years working on the railroads.
Yeah.
But it's like he did other things in his life. And he knew other people and went other places very often.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're getting at with our Gustav Gump.
Yeah.
That's his surname, by the way.
Okay. Social imagination is the other course he was very good at, and this course is where the students learn about existing economic, political, and social systems, but then are inspired and taught how to critically think about developing new ones. So this will play a role in his later life, we'll get to it, but these two were quite foundational for him, and he was very good at them, very invested in them. When he was 13, he started volunteering as a tour guide in the museums of art, but then by walking around and talking about these pieces, he started to have an interest in the minds of the people who made them and how he could develop his mind to be a bit more like theirs. Because up until this point, as we often talk about, if all of your input is art versions of stuff, but not the actual flowers that they're based off of, it can shift how you then create art or you then perceive the world. So that's when his interest in the real world started to bud, age 13.
Maybe this is also the year he asks, why is he named Gustav?
Yeah.
So he starts to learn, maybe that's his in, when he gets really into learning about Moreau as a person.
Yeah.
Not just as a painter.